Hi, this is Ben Ruggles, Director of Rink Operations at Phillips Academy in Andover, Mass. In June of 2014, the Board of Directors at USA Hockey adopted the policy statement allowing rinks to install a lookup line in their facility. This video is intended to help you install a lookup line in your rink. I'm here today with Eric Matlin, Rink Supervisor here at Phillips Academy, and also the foreman for this project. We're first going to go over the supplies we needed. We purchased Jet Ice 151 Safety Orange ice paint. They thought we'd need 5 gallons. We wanted to make sure, so we bought 2 5-gallon buckets. We ended up using 8 gallons, but we'll go over that later. Each 5-gallon bucket cost $120 plus shipping. You can see we got yarn that cost about $3 or $4. We have a barrel, a mixing barrel that we use, but you could also use another 5-gallon bucket. That would work as well. We have a drill bit mixer that we used with a battery-operated mixer. We have a variety of paint brushes that we had on hand, 2-inch and 4-inch brushes. We had 4 sets of rollers, the sleeves, the roller itself, and also the trays, and we got extensions for them so we could stand up and do that without having to get on our knees. We needed a way to draw the 40-inch radius for the lookup line, and Eric constructed that contraption.
I used 1/2-inch thick pieces of poly we had laying around, and I cut it to 3 strips that I mounted together, and they would run along the boards. The 2 ends, there is a radius in it so that only the 2 ends will touch the boards, and then the marker will sit 40 inches out from the boards, and then the other piece is just a cross brace that can be of whatever length you need to fit there. You can see the diagram for further dimensions. We used a Sharpie Magnum marker that we use for marking the ice for skating lessons. We had many laying around, so I knew exact size of the hole I needed for my marker. You could also use a block of wood and a hose clamp mounted to the board if you had a different size marker. These are the backpack sprayers we used this year. They made quick work of the sealing in the yarn and the paint, and then we did end up using them to paint the orange as well in the end. These are our old sprayers, which would not have worked for spraying the paint, and they barely work for spraying water at this point. I think the backpack sprayers are a worthwhile investment. We had some 1-gallon buckets that we could use for mixing paint and transferring the paint, and adding water to the larger bucket.
Okay, so we have everything in, and we're now ready to put the line down, the outline down. As you can see here, we have a crew of 5 that put in the bond coat and also the 4 coats of white paint. And after this, we'll actually seal it in with probably 3 or 4 more coats of water before we actually put the line down for the lookup line. If you figure there's 5 here, we actually cut down to 4 when we installed the line. If you use $25 per hour times 4 is basically $100 an hour in labor. It took us 5 hours to install the line this year, but we were doing a lot of different things so we could put this video together. We easily could cut that down to 3 hours the next time with a crew of 4. So you're looking at about $300 in labor. Eric's going to talk about exactly how we drew that line in. Eric?
Alright, well, you take your jig with the marker, you make sure it's pressed firmly up against the boards, and with the marker make sure it's actually touching the ice, and you want to drag it along the whole time. You want to push it into the boards to make sure you're not coming off the boards. At the seams we tend to get ice bumps forming from the water dripping down the boards, so you want to take care and lift it up a little bit to get over those bumps. If you do have any points where the marker strays from the 40-inch mark, you can easily wipe those away so they won't be seen after painting and before you seal it in. We only did the 4 corner radiuses and 1 straight panel coming off the radius, and then we ran yarn down the straightaways. Here we're sealing in that yarn that we have 1 guy at each end holding the yarn in place, pulling it taut, and then I'm sealing it in with the backpack sprayer and then stepping on it to make sure it seals into the ice surface. We usually give it a few coats to make sure it's thoroughly sealed, as we're going to run the paint stick along this yarn line and use it as our straight edge to get a nice clean line down the whole length of the ice.
There was thought about going around the entire rink with that jig, but you guys like this, to use the yarn as a guide, right?
Yeah, I think the amount of time you would save by running it all the way around, you can easily lay in the yarn, and you can choose to leave that yarn in place or pull it up when you're done. So the paint comes in a pretty thick concentrate. It's very gloopy, as you can see here. Um, we weren't sure exactly what ratio to use. They recommend 2 parts water to 1 part paint if you're going to spray it. Initially, we did not want to go with spraying. We thought it would be too messy a process, and we didn't know if our sprayers could handle it. So we initially started with brushes and rollers, so we had to experiment to get the right ratio of water to paint. And we kept track. We did 1-gallon buckets into a 5-gallon bucket, and then added quarts of water and kept track of them and kept mixing, adding a little, mixing, adding a little. And we were also preparing paint for the paint stick, which we were going to use to follow the yarn and the radius line around the perimeter to give ourselves a nice border to work with for the rollers. Here we are adding some more water to the paint, and then we use the drill bit mixer to thoroughly mix it. We also would then take those buckets and dump it into another 5-gallon bucket, back and forth, just to get a good thorough mix. Sometimes the clumps at the bottom wouldn't get hit by the drill bit mixer. In between, we would take the brush and we would go out to the lookup line layout and do a couple tests to see how it was flowing on the ice, if it was good. Here we're using the mixing stick to see the consistency. And when, like I said, we would check it on the ice and see if it was too thick or too thin, and we had some more concentrate we could add if it got too thin. Here we are, mixing bucket to bucket to get a good, thorough, consistent mix. We were doing this in our garage where we keep our flooding hose. We were trying our best not to get the paint on the floor so it wouldn't get tracked on the ice. Obviously some got dripped, and we took care to make sure we hosed it down before we started doing the seal-in. And it was a trial and error process. We kept going and going with the water and the paint. Then finally we reached our optimal consistency. This batch here was actually for the paint stick, which was pretty close to what we used for the brush and the rollers. And then once we found their consistency, we went to the 20-gallon barrel and mixed up a larger batch that we could start dispensing into the roller trays. So that first batch of paint that we mixed up, we were diluting for the paint stick to do our border around the yarn and the corner radius line. Here Matt Gray, our operations manager, is filling up the paint stick jug. Anyone that has used a paint stick before knows that mixing the paint isn't really an exact science. Each time it can be a little bit different depending on the temperature of the paint, the temperature of the water, the consistency of the paint. So, this was our first attempt. Once you get the paint loaded in, then you have to get the paint stick head primed. Here Matt is trying to get the stick to flow properly. As it turned out, that first batch was a little bit too thick for the paint stick. So after a few tries, we brought it back in, added a little bit more water, again trying to keep track of how much we're adding so we know for future use. Once you add the water, you want to seal it up and make sure that you give it a good shake and get the paint mixed up well. You also have to remember that now you have that hose about 6 feet like the hose that goes down to the paint stick head, and any paint that made its way through there has to get cleared out before you're going to see the results of your new mix of paint. So the orange line up against the boards, that's where we tested the consistency with our brushes to make sure we had good coverage and it would flow nicely. And then on the right, you see Matt getting the paint stick primed. Again, anyone that's used the paint stick before knows you gotta have that cap open to get airflow, as well as the control valve to control your flow. And usually once you get the flow going, it runs pretty smooth. And then once you get it going, you want to go right up against your yarn. It'll give you a nice straight line, and you're going to keep going right into your marker radius line. Once you hit the radius line, when you no longer have yarn, you got to just have a nice steady hand and follow that line. You can lay yarn over this line, but that's a kind of a time-consuming step to lay that in the radius, and it's not really necessary for a short run. But it is really nice to have that yarn for the straightaways. Even a steady hand is going to show some signs of wavering down a long stretch of 200 feet, so that yarn really keeps you on track for a nice clean line. We ended up doing 2 full laps with the paint stick, which gave us a nice border for the rollers and later for the spraying. It would have been nice to have a third line, I think, once we started using the sprayer. We got a little too close to the edge with the mist to get good coverage. They do make a 4-inch head for the paint stick. That would have been a nice add-on, but it's kind of pricey, so if you don't have one, it's probably not worth the investment for this project. So at first we thought we were going to use mainly the paint rollers to do the fill, and we did start with having our guys do the edge work, which turned out to be a little bit of a waste of time as they were painting way more than they needed to because we hadn't done enough testing with the roller yet. You could actually get pretty close to the boards, maybe about an inch out. You actually had to go back and touch up with a brush. So in hindsight, it might be wiser to just do the roller first and then go back and fill in whatever you couldn't get with the roller along the boards with a brush. You notice that the tray is facing into the boards and we keep pushing forward. We found that was the best way to get good coverage on the roller head without the tray moving around. It did require quite a bit of pressure to get the paint out of the roller head. You'd actually feel flex in the broom handle of the roller. The first few rolls didn't work quite as well. You had to get that roller head really saturated with paint, and then after that it worked pretty well. You got good coverage. We did mix the paint a lot thicker than the 2-to-1 ratio. I believe we did about I think it was about 3 quarts to 1 gallon of paint for this, for the roller application. So the 5-gallon bucket won't get you quite as far as it would with the 2-to-1 ratio. This is when we realized that we could get really close to the boards and that the edging was quite a bit of a waste of time to do up front anyway. It does have to be done in the end. Those guys probably would have been better used to just have them keep filling our paint trays with paint in the beginning, get most of the fill done, and then we could have them touch up the edges like Steve is doing here. We did probably about 2/3 to 3/4 of our rink all the way around with the rollers. We realized it was taking quite a bit of time, and we decided to give the backpack sprayer a try. So at this point, we started mixing the paint to the spray ratio of 2-to-1, and started prepping for using the backpack sprayer.
Just one thing to emphasize too to the guys: stay inside the line, right, as much as you can, so we're not making messes outside the line.
Yeah, and we use it as a sidewalk too, walking to and from the paint stations. This is Thomas Smith, the inventor of the lookup line. We had him get involved. This was his pet project, so we wanted him to get on the ice and be involved in it.
And he was happy to do so.
Yeah, he hit a ball out there. So once we decided to give the backpack sprayer a try, we mixed the paint to the recommended spraying ratio, which was 2 parts water to 1 part paint. I believe I might have added a little bit more once it was in the sprayer, just to get a little bit better of a mist out of it. It still comes out a lot thicker than the water would. It did take a little while to get control of it, but once you realized how it was spraying, it was fairly consistent. Just had to go side to side. I think it would have been nice to have an extra or a third lap with the paint stick. It was a little tough to keep it inside the lines as it was with the 2 laps, but it was still manageable. And again, you could get pretty close to the board, so it'd probably be worthwhile to just paint what you can with the backpack sprayer on a future project, and then have the guys come back and touch up along the boards with a brush, anything you couldn't hit. After I finished doing the fill-in, I went back around and I did touch up over the roller spots if anything was a little thin or uneven. And then once we had the orange done, I had one of my workers, Adam, go around and seal it in with a clear water backpack sprayer and seal that paint in nicely. At this point, we had our other staff members starting to do the other layout work of laying the red line and blue line yarn and laying out the templates and the logos. We actually did not paint till the next day the colors of red and blue, so that's why we made sure to thoroughly seal in the orange paint just in case we had any humidity issues overnight or any temperature changes, things of that nature. The orange would be sealed in nicely. You can see here Adam doing the seal-in coat. You want to go light at first and then a couple heavier coats after that, make sure it's thoroughly sealed. So the final thoughts I have for this project, if we do it again, I think we'd do 3 laps with the paint stick and then go straight to the backpack sprayer, and then we would just touch up along the boards with a brush as needed. The ratio would be easy. You could probably use the same mix for the paint stick pretty easily, and you'd save a lot of time that way.
So the total cost, total time would be about 3 hours, right, Eric?
Yeah, I think we could get it down to that.
And we figured it would probably cost us about $450 to do it the next time. Okay, great. Thanks, Eric. Great job.
Thank you.
On behalf of Phillips Academy, I hope you learned how to install this lookup line, got some pointers from us, learned from our mistakes. It's a pretty simple process. Hopefully you can put this in your rink as well. If you have any questions, feel free to call us here at Phillips Academy.
We would like to thank Phillips Academy and also USA Hockey and NCAA Hockey for their interest in the lookup line safety program and allowing us to work with them on this. On behalf of the Thomas E. Smith Foundation and Lookup Line Safety Task Force, thank you for your time and consideration. If you have any questions, please visit our website, justcareparalysis.org, and feel free to email us at info@justcareparalysis.org. Thank you.